You know, in politics, it's often the simplest promises that pack the biggest punch. And recently, Donald Trump made one that really cuts through all the noise. And it's aimed at something millions of us deal with every single month: our credit card bills. So, this all kicked off with a social media post. In it, he declared that the American public would no longer be ripped off. And what was the solution? A 1-year cap on all credit card interest, with a very specific, and let's be honest, a very catchy number right at the center of it all. 10%. Yeah, it's just so clean, isn't it? It's simple, and it almost feels morally right. I mean, when you're used to seeing rates of 20, 25, even 30%, a nice round number like 10 feels like a powerful, no-nonsense fix. But that raises the big question here. Is this a serious piece of economic policy? Is a 10% cap actually something that's meant to become law? Well, here's the thing. If you ask anyone who really knows banking or regulation, you get a pretty clear and resounding no. A nationwide 10% cap just isn't considered workable in our current system. It could actually cause huge disruptions to the flow of credit for millions of people. Okay, so if the policy itself is basically a non-starter, then what's really going on? This suggests it's not really about the economics, it's about strategy. So what's the actual play here? It all comes down to a classic negotiation tactic called anchoring. The idea is you propose something extreme, something that sounds morally appealing but is practically kind of impossible. The goal isn't to get that extreme thing passed, it's to completely change the entire conversation. Just think about it for a second. The current reality for most of us is credit card rates somewhere between 20 and 30%. So by dropping this anchor way down at 10%, you create this huge gap. And that gap, well, that's where the political maneuvering really begins. And this is where it gets really clever. All of a sudden, the banks and opposing politicians are totally on the defensive. They're stuck having to explain the complicated economics of why a 25% interest rate is necessary. And that is a losing argument in the court of public opinion, no matter how solid the math might be. Because once that 10% number is out there floating around, a future compromise at, say, 15 or even 18%, well, that suddenly doesn't sound so radical anymore. In fact, it starts to sound pretty reasonable. The entire playing field has been shifted without a single bill ever getting passed. A great way to think about it is like a ship dropping its anchor way, way upwind. The point isn't for the ship to end up where the anchor landed. The point is to use that anchor to drag the entire ship over to a completely new position, making a spot that used to seem unreachable the new center of the map. But here's the thing, anchoring the conversation is just half the story. There's another equally powerful strategy going on at the same time: good old-fashioned distraction. In media circles, they have a term for this. It's called flooding the zone. The basic idea is you create a loud, simple, and emotionally charged story, like a big fight against the evil banks, and you just completely saturate the news cycle with it. And the effect is pretty much instant. All those other, maybe more uncomfortable topics, they get pushed right off the headlines. Unresolved questions, old political baggage, it all gets obscured. Everything gets simplified into this good versus evil story, and you have a very clear villain: the credit card companies. It's kind of like you're watching a play, and right in the middle of a really important scene, the main actor just starts this huge, over-the-top sword fight. The whole audience is captivated, right? You're so focused on the hero and the villain that you don't even notice the actual plot has completely stalled. The fight itself becomes the point. All right, so if we know it's not really going to become law, and it's all about this bigger strategy, where does this kind of thing usually end up? I mean, how do these political battles actually play out? Well, it usually follows a pretty predictable path. You start with the big, loud proposal, right? That gets everyone talking. Then come the public hearings, a storm of media attention. After that, behind the scenes, the hardline stance starts to soften up a bit. And finally, some kind of smaller, more symbolic victory is declared. At the end of the day, you almost never get the massive, fundamental reform that was promised. What you get instead are these softer mechanisms, maybe some pressure on high penalty rates or small tweaks to late fees. It's just enough to be able to claim a win without really rocking the boat for the industry. And all of this, every single step, it all serves the ultimate goal, which isn't perfect policy. It's something way more valuable, especially in an election year: narrative dominance. Controlling the story is way more important than actually changing the law.
Because let's be honest, when all is said and done, most people aren't going to remember the fine print of some regulation. What they will remember is the fight. They'll remember who looked like they were on their side, fighting for them, while everyone else was just bickering over the math.
So the next time you see one of these big, bold, simple political promises pop up in your feed, it's probably worth taking a second and asking yourself, is the real goal here to change the law, or is it just to change the conversation?